I'll admit, I was never the biggest fan of Chapter 6 when playing Paper Mario casually. There were a couple fetch quests, and in my opinion, too much backtracking. When I learned to speedrun the game, that changed since the movement in flower fields is pretty fun. It's fairly straightforward though, and very few glitches are used in this chapter. There are some fun tricks that don't save any time, but even still, this is considered to be a more solid segment of the game. You might be wondering why exactly I came to the conclusion of this challenge. Completing Chapter 6 without using the standard berry items and without changing partners. Thanks to this convenient map created by petunia, check out these flowers situated near the white gates. To access the regions beyond, Mario must feed them a berry of their respective color. These gates have double-sided invisible walls, with the exception for some reason being the yellow flower gate. At the very least, you're required to gather a single red berry, yellow berry, blue berry, and much later the bubble berry, which needs to be used for crossing this spike pit. For the sake of this video, we must skip all of those. To avoid confusion, let me touch on a required story item known as the Crystal Berry, which even with the most complicated of glitches cannot be skipped if we wish to genuinely finish the chapter. Because it's classified as a different category of items altogether and can only be obtained once, I would still consider it to be fair game for this challenge. Then comes the restriction of partner swaps. What I mean by this is the partner menu simply cannot be opened, whether it be on the overworld or in battles. This prevents us from changing party members at will. We get one partner to start, and any changes to this partner must be done forcibly by the game, severely limiting our options. Each partner has a unique ability, some of which are necessary to make progress. There are a couple partner requirements in flower fields, including numerous uses of Parakarry to fly across this spike section, swimming with Sushi across the spring, using Bombette to blow up a rock at the Sun Tower, and mounting Lackluster to solve a puzzle. I've chosen Watt as my initial party member for additional difficulty, as she has no applications in this entire section. Now, Flower Fields is vulnerable to tons of loading zone storage exploits. Also known as LZS, we can use frame-perfect jumps to delay a room transition. The catch is, our analog stick must be neutral the frame before each jump input. This means moving with a loading zone stored is feasible with a neutral jump and readjusting Mario's angle in midair, the exception being an angle input on the exact frame we jump. Remember, the control stick still needs to be neutral one frame before this. As a result, minimizing the number of frame-perfect jumps and optimally LZSing generally requires a double frame-perfect controller input every time Mario is about to land. Paper Mario runs at 30 FPS, so this means frame-perfect button presses are accurate to 1/30th of a second. LZS has two main out-of-bounds applications. It can be used to offset the angle Mario enters the next area with, and combined with our momentum, could be enough to skew outside the game world depending on our position before loading. While falling, we have some control over Mario's trajectory, and can use it to reach previously inaccessible ledges or seams. The other is much more difficult to perform and is only possible in certain areas. A majority of loading zones have back walls, preventing us from just jumping off the world with LZS. But in all tested areas of flower fields, that is not the case. With careful enough movement, this provides a method onto narrow portions of solid ground still considered out of bounds, where most collision is non-existent. Unfortunately, these seams are often only 1 or 2 pixels wide, so it's quite easy to fall off or just end up back in bounds. And that's not even including the fact that we'd be forced to continue doing double frame perfect jumps, since we had to cross a loading zone to reach the section to begin with. I think that's enough explaining to set up all the craziness we'll encounter with these preset stipulations, so let's get going. Although using berries to navigate flower fields is a large portion of the chapter, our main goal includes collecting fertile soil, a magical bean, the miracle water, and solving the eternal cloudiness stifling the growth of new plants. This is all to plant a beanstalk that will allow us to reach the boss. Our first objective is saving Petunia from these Monty moles. It's not all that difficult and can be done quickly since I have a lot of attack increasing badges. For battles including a large set of these enemies, Mega Quake can deal with them all in one turn. After helping her out, she gifts us a magical bean, and that sets us up to begin the next section, which will kick off the glitches in this run. We were intended to grab a red berry from the tree in Petunia's room, unlock the red gate, grab a yellow berry from that room, and unlock the yellow gate. An angle skewing LZS skips that sequence, and we can maneuver out of bounds beyond the gate and spikes. This means we can speak to Lily, progressing the story events closer to when we obtain the miracle water. I mentioned earlier that the yellow gate had one-way collision, so it's possible to reach the main room without an extremely difficult LZS trick. However, paracarry is a must-have to avoid falling in the spikes. No partner swapping is allowed, so we need a way out of bounds around the gate. It's not possible to offset the entrance angle in a way that allows us to land on the seam, so LZSing around the entire room it is. It takes over 60 frame-perfect inputs, even if all movements are done perfectly. Adjusting around corners may look easy, but in reality it's arguably harder than timing the jumps. You may also notice that I hit the left loading zone without falling down to save a few frames. This is possible since loading zones extend upwards, and there's an out-of-bounds pixel-perfect sector where it can be activated from the ledge above. Next up, we need to speak with Rosie to claim the water stone, and she's beyond the blue flower gate. Bypassing this gate is similar to the previous LZS. We favor the foreground seam here since pressing A to jump near the blue flower would involve speaking to him, and ultimately would send us back to the room we came from. Before the hedge maze, we are ambushed by 2 Lakitus and their spiny companions. Watt is not the best partner for dealing spread damage, so I came prepared with shooting stars to quickly beat these enemies. The double dip ability gives us 2 item uses in one turn, dealing exact damage to the Lakitus. The path through the maze is consistent, just a matter of knowing where to go. Unfortunately, we have a bit of backtracking to do since Rosie requests the crystal berry in exchange for the water stone. That means it's time to LZS around the blue gate from behind, followed by an even more daunting LZS around the red gate. I actually stuck with the background seam in this instance, since it's faster, and a jump executed with extreme precision between the flower and gate gives direct access to the next area, without activating the dialogue. The red flower gate loading zone storage doesn't get any more complex on us, but it's still a ton of frame-perfect inputs. I choose to remain on the seam until the rough puff is out of range. We've nicknamed this the death room since the enemies are pretty difficult to avoid, and since we only have 1 health to benefit from the attack increase provided by the Mega Rush badge, getting first struck would be game over. Best to play it safe and stay out of bounds until the path is clear. Once we get the crystal berry, we return to Rosie, which is going to include many more frame-perfect jumps. I have not pointed this out yet, but the gate hitboxes extend slightly out of bounds, so it is necessary to readjust Mario's angle to give him upwards momentum during the first frames of his descent. A lot of objects do not have collision here, but some small bushes could also push us back in bounds. Once again, we are headed to the hedge maze, and this time we won't have to worry about a fight. We do, however, need to hop around the gate. Again. The most complicated LZS is still ahead of us, but consistency with the frame-perfect jumps is key for these more simple variants. The next scenes are self-explanatory, so I'm speeding this up until we reach the next glitch. The back seam here is once again faster, even though it's not a perfectly straight line. These out-of-bounds ledges are so slim that I had to make slight angle adjustments each time, and choose to show that it's possible to fall underneath the gate. That's technically slower, but it could skip a few extreme angles and frame-perfect inputs. It's time for Yellowberry skip again, since we'll be handing the water stone to Lily. Because the LZS skew began from a slightly different position, it was impossible to do a single full jump around the corner from Mario's spin, instead opting for 2 short hops as the fastest backup. The speed trade-off was overall positive because the crazy daisies were easier to avoid. Optimized movement is always a plus. Shortly after all the water returns to this area, there is a portion where we have to swim through the spring. The developers intended for us to use sushi and dock near the bubbleberry tree, but since we can't use partners or berry items, we get to have fun with another LZS trick. The following room provides a couple options, and LZSing across the background seam is fastest. However, I use the foreground so it's easier to visualize. Collision exists both above and underwater, so we can utilize either seam to make our way through this area. You might think it's faster to pick a direct angle once on water, but there are double-sided invisible walls preventing us from jumping on land. Remaining out of bounds until then is the best option. For the final time, we get to repeat the room-wide LZS exploit to fully skip the yellow berry. Towards the end, notice I did not activate the loading zone from above and instead choose to showcase a slightly less optimal but easier final jump. Coming up is one of the more simple storage tricks in terms of frame-perfect inputs. That said, we can shortcut a few jumps with an extremely precise method out of bounds. A practically angle-perfect jump next to the left tree root from a near pixel-perfect position can push Mario above the door. Follow that up with a double frame perfect angle perfect jump, and we can once more execute a double frame perfect jump through the tree, saving a couple seconds. The LZS continues beyond the top right root to distort our entrance just enough. From the coordinates we LZS'd from, up left is held for 51 frames minimum or 52 frames maximum to land on the front ledge. Going left through the spike pit would still damage Mario, so an additional fall from the bottom right corner is necessary to land atop the back ridge. Next is the Sun Tower, and Bombette is essential to climbing it. This partner swap is skipped with a quick but still fairly challenging maneuver around the loading zone to scale the tower. The only reason for entering this area is speaking with the Sun to progress the story. Dialogue takes priority over room transitions, so the sequence occurs without issue and we instantly leave the room once complete. Conveniently, we would have returned here anyway to fight Lackluster. He has 50 health and 0 defense, so with our massive attack power, we can dispatch him with ease. Power Bounce is exponentially powerful at high damages, making it especially useful. The number of possible bounces is dependent on RNG. Numerous factors are accounted for to prevent players from abusing this ability, but it's still incredibly overpowered. By changing the frame we choose to strike, luck can be manipulated to increase the bounce cap. Anything above 7 power bounces on bosses and mini-bosses is normally considered pretty rare. Lackluster ends up joining Mario's party in this cutscene. He overwrites the active partner, and appropriately, he's the only partner needed to restore sunshine to flower fields. Keep in mind this was a forced switch, since we never had Lackluster at this point. If we had him to begin with, the challenge would be no different. Now that he's part of the gang, we can complete the puzzle prior to breaking the Puff Puff machine. Lackluster remains the only required partner usage in this entire chapter, because the area is surrounded by spikes. Falling under the spikes is not feasible either, since clearing that much distance over one fall is not known to be possible. After making our way to the Puff Puff machine and defeating the enemies there, we can break it with the hammer. I use a technique called hammer cancelling to speed up the process, which involves pressing B on the second frame of impact to skip part of the animation. It's possible to hammer so fast that the hits won't register on the machine, so they were still spaced. On the final hit, a spin could be buffered out of the hammer cancel to initiate a coordinate-based dialogue sequence. Mario's partner reminds us to break the machine before we leave the room, as it falls apart before our very eyes. It wastes no time to perform, so why not? Sunshine has returned to Flower Fields, and the beanstalk can finally be planted. With that comes numerous lengthy cinematics, so I'll get straight to the point. Our final objective includes defeating the chapter boss. Not too much exposition takes place for him, but his name is Huff and Puff. Supposedly, he wished to cover Flower Fields in eternal darkness. He has 60 health and no defense, but is kind of gimmicky. Each time he's hit, smaller Tough Puffs pop out, and they can deal extra damage or heal Huff and Puff. The best strategy in dealing with this is to 0 to death him, and we are capable of just that. After charging a jump attack and manipulating an attack increasing spell for Power Bounce, he's basically done for. And of course, I decided to finish this video off with a background swap on the Star Spirit card. I just wanted to give a shout out to Bone Crusher and Robdog for their work and testing with LZS here, and for being awesome Paper Mario glitch hunters. This is also my first time experimenting with a video overlay, so I wouldn't need to stretch the gameplay video. The Sneaky Spy is my go-to guy for that kind of thing, and he's created my intro, outro, and border now. So give him some love, and consider checking out the description for more detailed credits and channel links. Hope you enjoyed this glitch challenge, and as always, thank you for watching.